Hey YouTube, Kevin Clear with a knife video. I got a pretty unique blade for you here today. One that I have thoroughly enjoyed owning, and it's been a real pleasure to get this in hand, and it's a real joy to be able to share it with you. This is the Zero Tolerance 0392. Okay, very nice blade, extremely well finished, extremely precise in its construction. It is a factory custom, is what Zero Tolerance calls it, so they're quite limited. And this one is modeled after the Hinderer Eclipse. In fact, size and shape and all that kind of stuff is pretty much exactly like a Hinderer Eclipse, to the point that the hardware that you see on here actually comes from Hinderer to Zero Tolerance, and then they assemble it. Kind of an interesting process, and of course that doesn't affect performance in any way, but it does make it a little more exclusive, a little more collectible. Okay, so pretty cool blade. I will say that overall, very nice. Everything is really well done on this knife. Certainly I can't point to anything as a complaint. It is just very well done. All right, so let's get into the specifics about this, and I'll give you size and weight and all that stuff. I'll have some comparisons, and then we'll go through our typical lineup of blade and handle and lockup and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so size and weight on this, it is just over 8¼ inches, so 8 and say 5/16, which is a pretty good size for an everyday carry knife. The blade on this is 3 5/8. The handle is 4 3/4, and both of those are just a little off. Okay, it's not quite on the line. They're just to add a little bit to each of those measurements, not even a full 16th. So that's why I'm just giving you those round numbers. The weight on this is 5.9 ounces. Now 5.9 ounces is maybe a little heavy for the size on this, but it's not the end of the world. Okay. Certainly this knife carries well. I have carried it, albeit I was pretty careful on those days that I did carry it not to rub the pocket clip against anything or anything like that. This knife is, I will say, probably more of a collector piece. Now you could be out there and you just really love it. You love tie frame locks, and maybe you've got a Hinderer Eclipse but you want something a little different. So I'm not saying that nobody out there should ever use this. I'm not saying that you shouldn't buy one as a high-end carry knife. For me, it's more collectible, and that does limit it just a little. Okay, let's give you a couple of comparisons. Now that you've got the numbers in terms of size and weight, I want to show you a couple other Zero Tolerance Hinderer collabs. One is one of my all-time favorite knives, the Zero Tolerance 0560. This thing is just phenomenal. Great knife. Anyway, obviously it's not the same price or anything like that, but I do want to show it to you so that this obviously is a blade that more people are going to have and be familiar with, so that way you can sort of see how it compares. The other knife that I want to show you is the 0562. You've seen this before if you've watched many of my videos. Again, this knife is pretty well the closest thing that you can get to a production knife, the closest thing you can get to an XM18 in a production knife. And this, of course, is about the closest thing you can get to an Eclipse in a, I'm going to say, semi-production knife. So you can see kind of, this is a knife that's pretty familiar. Lots of people know about and love the XM18, and I'm sure lots of people own and love the 0562. So that gives you an idea of size. It's very close in size to the XM18 or the 0562. Well, again, you can see that it's considerably smaller than the 0560. Okay, so that's how it compares to some other blades that you might be more familiar with, just because, as I say, there are not a huge number of these out there. Not that there's none or anything, they can be had, but they're just not all over the place. Let's talk about some of the specifics on this. Okay, as usual, we'll start with the blade. The blade is 3 5/8 inches of CTS 204P. That's Carpenter's version of M390. Very good steel. I have a few blades in that steel, and I've been quite impressed with it. It does have Hinderer's working finish on it, which is really nice. If you do plan to use this knife, it's going to hold up pretty well to wear and tear without showing a lot. It is sort of a modified clip point, maybe just a clip point. Pretty traditional blade style. Okay, so you've got a fair amount of just straight edge down here, and then belly primarily at the front. Comes to a fairly acute point, but it does, as do many zero tolerances, it's made to be fairly robust and durable, and so it does carry quite a bit of steel out to the end, which is pretty cool. I guess this is about the right time to zoom in a little, so let's try and do that. I'll move to the side so you can see the knife a little better. Okay, come on. The remote doesn't maybe want to listen to me right now. There we go. Okay, so let me show you that blade again. You can see that there is quite a bit of material carried out to the end. So if you were going to treat this as a user, it's going to be fairly robust, okay? There's no reason why, from a design standpoint, you could not use this and use it pretty hard. It's a very durable knife, okay? So let's see, we've got, told you the blade steel. Oh, it is a flat grind, and you've got this nice swedge on top, which is more of a design element than anything else. As we're kind of used to, you have the zero tolerance logo here, and then on this side it just gives you, blade steel and serial number and all that kind of stuff. 0392, Hinder design. So same stuff we're kind of used to seeing. I've got to tell you, one thing that I always think about zero tolerance is, I know this is technically the show side of the knife, but I actually always really like the look of the frame side. There's sort of some cool details there. So I always really enjoy, and a lot of times if I'm taking pictures for Instagram or whatever, I'll prefer the frame side on a knife, and I think this one is that way. I really like the way this looks from a design standpoint, just aesthetically. Let's see, very sharp, and it comes pretty sharp. This has not been heavily used, and you can understand why. It's fairly collectible, so you can actually still see all of the grind lines in the secondary bevel from that factory edge. All right, so that's the blade for you. Very good performing blade. Maybe a little thick, as often zero tolerances are. The edge geometry is fine. It cuts well, but it's a little thicker than other production knives, and certainly this is going to be a little thicker than something like the slicer grind that's on the 0392. Okay, let's move on to lockup and deployment. Here is one of the areas this knife really shines. I can't tell you anything that I have that's this smooth. It is really, really well done, okay? This would be, if this would be like sort of a standard setting smoothness, okay? I would be comparing other blades to this in terms of, I would say this is how smooth a blade should be. It's just amazing, okay? Like glass, it's just fantastic, exceptionally well done. I don't know what else to tell you other than this is about the smoothest knife I have ever felt, and you guys know I've flipped a fair number of knives. The detent is maybe a little stiff on this. It gets a little uncomfortable if you're flipping it for hours on end, which of course all of us are tempted to do, but it's not a deal breaker. You can see, it's not like I'm breaking my finger off trying to flip it. It is stiff enough though that you've preloaded a fair bit of force in there, and it does flip out very, very quickly. Lock does have the stainless steel lock bar insert, as well as the lock bar stabilizer from Hinderer. Both of those things are really nice additions, and they're things that I kind of like to see on my titanium frame lock knives these days. Not all of them have it. I think I've recently put some videos up of knives that don't have a lock bar insert. Not the end of the world, but it certainly is preferred, okay? The blade stops here are blade stops. They're really not for deploying the knife. It's pretty much exclusively a flipper, all right? They do seat very nicely into the frame, and there's a lot of little details that go around blade stops, the stop pin back here, and these blade stops. They have to be extremely well done, and certainly on this they are, providing just a rock solid lockup, okay? So in terms of lockup and deployment, this knife would be on the short list of the very best that I have ever seen, okay? Exceptionally well done. Let's talk about the handle next. The handle is, of course, full titanium. It is very comfortable. I love the blue anodized hardware on this. I did point out, I may have mentioned it earlier, but I'll say again, you could actually change this hardware out. One, I'm sure there's guys, if you look on the secondary market, maybe on eBay or whatever, you could find hardware for this. But also, because this is so close to the Hinder or Eclipse, the Eclipse hardware will fit this, so that, if you wanted, just plain titanium or maybe bronze anodized or some other colored anodized titanium, you could switch that out and sort of personalize your knife a little bit more and make it even that much more rare than it already is. Okay, so that's kind of a cool feature. Otherwise, the handle is very comfortable. Fits the hand really, really well. Certainly locks in. The jimping is okay. Now, back here, the jimping, the handle sort of restricts how much contact you can get, but if you really bear down, it cuts in pretty good, okay? In the reverse grip, there's not really too much jimping that comes in contact with your hand. One place that has jimping is here, and it only catches these last two fingers, and I don't know how much good that's actually doing. I feel like if it was up here instead, it would probably be a little more effective, but it's not the end of the world, of course. And I do find, I always harp on this, I'm going to say it again, I really like it when a knife achieves retention in hand by the shape of the handle instead of by covering the handle with all kinds of texturing. I prefer the shape of the handle to do the work of making this very, very grippy, and in this case that does happen. Just going to show you here at the back, this back standoff, there's barely enough room for a lanyard. So if you're a lanyard guy, you could get one on here, but you'd have to make sure it was really tight because the blade does come quite close there. You can maybe see that it does come fairly close, and you could cut that lanyard. Pocket clip is basically just a standard Hinder or pocket clip that we're all fairly used to seeing. But it is pretty cool, again, that you're buying the zero tolerance, but you are getting something from Hinder. Now, let's see, is there anything else that I really need to say on this? Not too much. I think overall the grip is comfortable and confidence inspiring, as is the overall design of the knife, which is one of the things that I really look for. Let me back out here and give you sort of some overall impressions. So where does this knife fit? I've got to say this, and I think this is kind of a limitation. To me, this knife is primarily a collectible, okay? That's not bad. I think there's a perfectly legitimate place for collecting knives. In fact, of course, I do that. However, one of the rules that I have for my collection, I know everyone doesn't have this rule, and I'm not encouraging anyone to adopt it, but for me, I like to own and collect knives that I can use, that I can pick up, put in my pocket, and make some use of. This knife doesn't quite fit that role for me, okay? Because of its exclusivity, because of its collectability, when I'm carrying it, I sort of feel like, I don't know what I want to, I've got to be really careful with this knife. So because of that, I'm not sure that I'm going to keep it forever. Certainly I enjoy having it. It's a great knife to sit on the couch while you're watching TV and flip, because it is honestly the best flipper that I have felt. Now I don't own a bunch of customs. I don't even own a bunch of mid-techs. I do own some Brose blades, and I think they're fantastic flippers, but they don't flip like this. They just don't. I have lots of knives that I think flip really well, but this thing is kind of in a class on its own for my collection, okay? I think if you wanted to use this, if you wanted to buy one of these as a user, great. I think more power to you. If you want to buy it as a collector's piece, one thing that I will say from quite a bit of time in the forums and watching these, they do tend to hold their value pretty well. So you're rarely, unless you buy it and then totally destroy it, you are buying a knife that is almost as good as money in the bank. They do hold up pretty nicely. And that's been true overall of most of the zero tolerance factory customs. Especially if you can buy one right off at the initial price, which is usually fairly reasonable, you can do pretty well. So from that standpoint, it's not a bad knife to own at all. Now, here's my biggest issue with this, okay? If you want a really nice knife that's a user, I would buy a 0560. I would buy a 0562. I would buy even a Hinder Eclipse ahead of this as a knife that I was going to put in my pocket and carry every day. And that's just my preference. You know, if you are if you say, hey, I really like the idea of carrying something and using something that very few people are going to have, and that people are going to, I'm going to pull in my pocket and people are going to be, whoa, that's what you're carrying. Hey, great, good for you. For me, if I'm looking at my knife display case to figure out what I'm going to carry in the morning, and these two knives are sitting side by side, I am going to take the 0560. It's just, for me, this is more of a user than this is. Okay, that's my overall impression. Fantastic knife, and as a user, it is well executed. Okay, there's nothing about the design to me that says, hey, this is not a good knife, but it's just more about the limited availability and the collectability of this knife. Okay, so there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. This is a phenomenal blade. It's really cool. I love what Zero Tolerance is doing with these. The new ones for this year are amazing. Okay, some of the, you know, because of what I've just said to you, I don't usually go crazy for Zero Tolerance, the factory customs, but I will say this year is one of those years, this is 2015 in case you're watching this 10 years from now, but the limited editions from this year are really cool. And they are, you know, they're knives that I maybe will try to get my hands on. Anyway, there you go, guys. That's my discussion. That's my take on the Zero Tolerance 0392. Absolutely beautiful knife in about every way that you can measure, you know, whether it be fit and finish, whether it be feel in hand, utility, durability, you know, everything is just 10 out of 10. The only limitation that I could, or the only qualification that I could give that is, maybe the detent is a little stiff, but it's not a big deal. All right. Hope you enjoyed the video and the discussion, and we'll talk to you soon.